She thought he was just another customer. But one quiet smile would soon reveal a secret worth billions and change her life forever. The morning sun had just started to shine through the diner's dusty windows when Sarah unlocked the front door. She took a deep breath, feeling the mix of coffee, syrup, and old wood that always filled the air. It was the smell of her second home. She had been working there for almost 3 years, ever since she left college to take care of her sick mother. Every morning was the same. She'd tie her apron, smooth her hair into a ponytail, get ready to smile, no matter how tired she felt. It wasn't that Sarah hated her job. She actually liked talking to people and making them feel welcome. But some days were hard. Her feet hurt, her pay was small, and the stack of hospital bills on her kitchen table only seemed to grow taller. Still, she tried to stay positive. Her mother always told her that good things come to people who stay kind, even when life isn't fair. The diner was small, the red vinyl booths, a long counter, and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. Most of the customers were regular truck drivers, old couples, and workers from nearby shops. They knew Sarah by name and loved how she remembered their favorite orders. She smiled even when she didn't feel like it, because she knew everyone was fighting their own quiet battles. That morning, just after the breakfast rush ended, the bell above the door jingled again. Sarah looked up, expecting one of the usuals, but it was someone she hadn't seen before. A man, maybe in his 50s, walked in slowly. He wore a dark jacket that looked simple but somehow expensive. It's like the kind of clothes you buy from stores that don't even have price tags. His hair was silver at the temples, and his face looked calm, almost too calm. It's like someone who didn't have to hurry anywhere. He took a seat in the far corner booth by the window, the one people rarely used. Sarah picked up her notepad and walked over, putting on her usual friendly smile. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you today?" she asked in her soft, cheerful voice. He looked up at her with kind eyes. "Just coffee, please. And maybe some eggs. However you think they're best." Sarah laughed a little. "That's a lot of trust to give a stranger's cooking," she said, writing down the order. He smiled faintly. "You don't look like you'd serve bad eggs." There was something about his tone, gentle but sure, that made her pause for a moment. Then she nodded and walked away, shaking off the feeling. Customers flirted or joked all the time. It was part of the job. But this man didn't sound like he was trying to impress her. He just seemed interested in a quiet way. As she cooked his order, she caught herself glancing at him a few times. He wasn't on his phone or staring around. He just sat there, watching the people come and go, sipping his water, looking thoughtful. When she brought his plate, he thanked her politely and started eating without saying much else. "Everything okay?" she asked after a few minutes. "Perfect," he said. "It tastes like home." The words made her smile. Not many people describe diner food like that. When he finished, he left a generous tip, far more than the usual few dollars. Sarah tried to wave it off, saying he must have made a mistake, but he simply said no mistake. Good service deserves good thanks. Then he left quietly, leaving her standing by the counter with the money in her hand and a puzzled look on her face. The rest of the day passed like any other. Customers came and went, and Sarah forgot about the man for a while. But when she was cleaning up at closing time, she found herself looking at the corner booth again. Something about the way he had sat there, observing, lingered in her mind. She wondered what kind of life he had. Maybe he was a writer or a retired teacher. He didn't look like the usual kind of traveler who stopped by on their way to somewhere else. The next morning, to her surprise, he came back. Same booth. Same calm expression. This time he ordered pancakes and coffee. Sarah greeted him like she would any other regular, but inside she was curious. "You're back," she said lightly. He nodded. "Best breakfast I've had in a long time," she laughed. "You must not get out much then." "I get out plenty," he said with a small grin. "Just not to places like this." There was no pride in his voice, just truth. Sarah couldn't quite figure him out. He seemed like someone who had seen a lot of the world but didn't need to prove it by the end of her shift. She decided he was probably just a quiet businessman passing through. Maybe his car broke down nearby, or maybe he liked the peace of a small-town diner. Whatever the reason, she didn't think much more of it. After work, She stopped by her mother's small apartment to bring her dinner. They talked and laughed like always, but as she drove home later that night, the man's calm face popped into her mind again. It wasn't attraction exactly, more like curiosity. She couldn't explain why he stood out. The following week went by, and Sarah's life stayed the same. Early mornings, tired feet, quick smiles. The man returned a few more times, always sitting in the same booth, always polite and kind. Sometimes they talked a little about simple things, the weather, how quiet the town was, the smell of the coffee, but nothing too personal. She didn't even know his name, yet every time he left, he tipped her well and said something that stuck with her. Once, when she apologized for spilling a bit of coffee, he said, "Mistakes don't ruin a day. Only unkindness does." It was such a small sentence, but it made her think about it the rest of the night. By the end of that week, the other waitresses started teasing her. "Your mystery man's back again," they'd whisper whenever he walked in. Sarah just rolled her eyes and said, "He's just another customer." But deep down, she wasn't so sure anymore. Something told her there was more to him than met the eye. Still, she never imagined that the quiet man in the corner booth, the one who ordered simple eggs and smiled softly when she poured his coffee, was anyone important. To her, he was just a kind stranger passing through her little world. She didn't know that soon. Her life was about to change forever. The man started coming to the diner almost every day after that. He always sat in the same corner booth by the window, always ordered the same simple meal, eggs, toast, and black coffee. At first, Sarah thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he liked the food or the quiet atmosphere. But soon, even the other waitresses noticed. They began whispering jokes behind the counter, calling him Sarah's mystery regular. Sarah laughed it off, saying he was just another customer who liked their breakfast. But deep down she was curious. His name, she finally learned, was Michael. She only knew because one day she saw it written on his credit card when he paid the bill. She thought about asking more, but he didn't seem like someone who liked to talk about himself. Whenever Sarah chatted with him, he was polite and warm, but always steered the conversation toward her instead. "You work here every day?" he asked once while she poured his coffee. "Almost," she said with a tired smile. 6 days a week. Sometimes 7 if someone calls in sick." "That's a lot," he said quietly. "You must really love this place," Sarah shrugged. "I wouldn't say love, but it pays the bills. My mom's been sick for a while, so every shift helps." He nodded slowly, looking thoughtful. "Your mom's lucky to have you," Sarah smiled, brushing it off. "She'd say she stuck with me." He chuckled softly. The kind of laugh that came from someone who didn't laugh often but meant it when they did. As the days passed, their small conversations became part of Sarah's routine. She found herself looking forward to seeing him, even though she told herself not to. He never acted like he was better than anyone else. Even though something about him felt different, like he didn't really belong in their small town. His hands were clean and smooth, not like the rough ones of the mechanics and truckers who usually came in. He spoke calmly, listened closely, and had this peaceful way of looking at people, as if he could see right through their words. Sometimes when the diner was quiet, he'd ask about her dreams. "What would you do if you didn't have to worry about money?" he asked once. Sarah laughed a little. "That's easy. I'd go back to school. I wanted to be a nurse before Mom got sick. But life happened, and dreams don't pay rent." He looked at her for a long second, like he was memorizing her answer. "Dreams can pay rent," he said softly, "if you keep them alive long enough." She didn't know what to say to that, so she smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. But his words stayed with her. That night, as she washed dishes at home, she thought about how long it had been since anyone asked about her dreams. One rainy afternoon, a few weeks later, Sarah's old car broke down in the diner's parking lot. She tried to start it again and again, but the engine just groaned. She was ready to give up when she heard a voice behind her. "Need some help?" She turned and saw Michael standing there, holding an umbrella. She was embarrassed. Her car was old and loud, and the last thing she wanted was anyone seeing her struggle with it. "It's fine," she said quickly. "She just does this sometimes. I'll figure it out." Michael leaned down and listened as she tried to start the car again. "Sounds like your starter's giving up," he said. "I can call a tow truck if you want. I know a reliable one nearby." Sarah sighed. "You don't have to do that. I'll handle it." "I don't mind," he said simply. "Besides, no one should stand in the rain trying to fix a car that clearly wants to rest." She laughed despite herself. "You make it sound like the car has feelings," he smiled. "Everything has feelings if you care enough to notice." Before she could argue, he'd already called for help. He waited with her under his umbrella until the tow truck came, even though the rain kept soaking his shoes. Sarah felt strange. No customer had ever done something like that for her. When the truck finally arrived, she thanked him over and over. "It's nothing," he said. "You've been serving me breakfast for weeks. The least I can do is make sure you get home safely." She didn't know how to respond, so she just smiled and said, "You really are something else, Michael." He just nodded. "So are you." After that day, Sarah began to notice little things about him. He never looked rushed, never checked his phone, never bragged about anything. He always listened more than he spoke, as if he valued other people's stories more than his own. When she told him about her mother's favorite soup, he asked for the recipe. When she mentioned how hard it was to keep up with bills, he didn't pity her, he encouraged her. "You're doing everything you can," he said once. "That's more than most people." When the diner got busy and she was running between tables, she'd catch him watching her, not in a creepy way, but in a calm, almost proud way. Like he admired how she kept smiling, even when things got tough. It made her heart beat faster, though she tried to ignore it. One evening, as she was wiping down the counter, her coworker Jenna leaned over and whispered, "That guy is rich. I can feel it. He's got that quiet money vibe." Sarah laughed. "Quiet money vibe? What's that supposed to mean?" "You know," Jenna said, lowering her voice, "he doesn't flash it, but you can just tell. Expensive watch, nice shoes, but no logos. Those are the kind of people who have real money." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Maybe he just has good taste. Not everyone's a billionaire, Jen." Jenna shrugged. "You'll see. He's not some regular guy." Sarah brushed off the thought. But later, when she brought Michael his bill, she couldn't help glancing at his wrist. His watch was simple, but it did look expensive. She smiled at herself for even noticing. What did it matter? He was kind, and that was enough. That night she told her mom about him while they ate dinner together. "He's just different," Sarah said. "He listens. He doesn't judge. It's nice talking to him." Mom smiled knowingly. "Maybe he reminds you that good people still exist." Sarah nodded, though she didn't say it out loud. But yes, that was exactly what it felt like. As the days passed, Michael became part of her routine. When he didn't come one morning, she caught herself feeling disappointed. The diner felt quieter without him there. But the next day, he returned with his usual smile. She found herself smiling too before she even realized it. Still, she never thought too deeply about who he was. To her, Michael was just a kind stranger who liked their diner's coffee and treated her with respect. She didn't know that behind that calm smile was a man whose name the whole world would soon recognize. For now, it was just Michael, the polite man in the corner booth, who listened like her stories mattered. And Sarah, busy and hopeful as ever, had no idea that her simple kindness was slowly changing both their lives in ways neither of them could yet see. Sarah woke up that morning with a heavy heart. She had barely slept. The night before, the hospital had called to say her mother's surgery had been delayed again because the bills hadn't been paid. She had tried everything, working extra shifts, selling her old furniture online, even borrowing small amounts from friends, but it still wasn't enough. The surgery cost more than she could ever save in months. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, wondering how she would tell her mother without breaking down. When she finally reached the diner, her smile wasn't as bright as usual. Her coworkers noticed right away. "Rough morning?" Jenna asked softly as Sarah tied her apron. Sarah just nodded, not wanting to talk about it. She didn't like showing weakness at work. Customers came to eat and relax, not to see a sad waitress. Still, it was hard to hide. Her movements were slower, her eyes a little red from lack of sleep. Even regulars noticed. But when the bell over the door jingled and Michael walked in, Sarah forced a smile. "Morning, Michael," she said, her voice softer than usual. He looked at her for a moment, his calm eyes sharper than usual. "Morning, Sarah," he said. "You look tired." "Everything okay?" She tried to laugh it off. "Just one of those days." He didn't push. He never did. He just nodded and took his usual booth by the window. Sarah poured his coffee, her hand shaking slightly as she tried to focus on her work. But Michael wasn't like most customers. He noticed things. He noticed when she forgot to bring water to another table. He noticed when she wiped her eyes quickly with her sleeve behind the counter. He didn't say anything right away. But when she came by to check on his meal, he spoke quietly, you know. "Sometimes talking helps," he said gently. Sarah hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I don't want to bother you with my problems." "You wouldn't be bothering me," he said. "Besides, problems are lighter when you share them." Something about his tone, calm, kind, genuine, made her pause. Maybe it was because he didn't sound like someone who just wanted to make conversation. He sounded like someone who cared. She sighed. "It's just my mom. Her surgery got delayed again. They won't do it until I pay more of the bill, and I'm already behind on rent. I've been working extra shifts, but it's still not enough." Michael listened quietly, nodding slowly. He didn't interrupt or try to give advice right away. He just listened. That alone made Sarah feel a little lighter. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "You're carrying a lot for one person." Sarah gave a weak smile. "It's fine. I'll figure something out. I always do." "You shouldn't have to do it alone," he said softly. But before she could respond, another customer called for her. She hurried away. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sarah focused on serving customers, but her mind kept drifting back to what Michael said. "You shouldn't have to do it alone." It was such a simple sentence, yet it made her throat tighten. When her shift ended late that evening, she was exhausted. As she cleaned the counter, she noticed something strange, an envelope tucked under her notepad, the one she used to take orders. Her name was written on it in neat handwriting. She looked around, confused. Most of the staff had already gone home. She glanced toward Michael's usual booth, but it was empty. He had left an hour earlier after paying his bill. Curious and nervous, she opened the envelope. Inside was a folded note and a small stack of cash. Her heart started pounding as she counted. It was $1,000. She froze, staring at it, unable to believe what she was seeing. The note was short. "Keep believing. The world notices kindness." Her hands trembled. She knew it had to be from him. No one else would do something like this. Tears filled her eyes as she held the note close. Reading it again and again, she felt a mix of emotions: shock, gratitude, confusion, even guilt. She didn't like accepting money from anyone, especially not from a customer. But there was something about the way he did it, quietly, without expecting anything back, that made it feel different. It wasn't pity. It was compassion. Sarah sat in the booth for a long time after closing, staring at the note. The words stayed in her mind like a soft whisper. The world notices kindness. She didn't know what to think. Why would someone like him care so much about her life? That night, when she got home, she showed her mother the envelope. Her mom's eyes widened. "Oh, Sarah, where did this come from?" Sarah told her everything about Michael. How he'd been coming to the diner for weeks, how kind he was, and how she found the envelope. Her mother smiled through tears. "There are still good people in this world," she said softly. "Maybe he's one of them." "I just don't know why he'd do this for me," Sarah said. "He doesn't even really know me." "Maybe he sees something in you," her mom replied. "Kindness finds kindness, sweetheart." Sarah stayed quiet, her eyes on the note. She couldn't explain the feeling inside her chest. It wasn't just happiness, it was warmth mixed with disbelief, as if life had suddenly reminded her that not all hope was lost. The next morning, she came to work early, hoping Michael would show up so she could thank him. She even made extra coffee and kept glancing toward the door every few minutes. But he never came. All day she waited. Each time the bell jingled, her heart jumped a little, but it was never him. By the time the diner closed, her excitement had turned into a quiet sadness. Over the next few days, she kept watching that corner booth. It stayed empty. She asked herself over and over, why would he give her so much money and then disappear? Was he embarrassed? Did he not want her to thank him? Or maybe he just moved on to another town. Still, every time she looked at the note, she smiled. It wasn't just about the money, it was the message. Someone, somewhere believed in her enough to remind her that her kindness mattered. One slow afternoon, when the diner was nearly empty, Sarah stood by the window, wiping down the table, and whispered to herself, "Thank you, Michael, wherever you are." Even though he was gone, his presence lingered. Every time she poured coffee for a tired customer or smiled at a stranger who looked sad, she thought of his words. Maybe he was right. Maybe kindness really did come back in ways you never expected. Sarah didn't know it then, but that simple act of generosity was only the beginning. Michael hadn't disappeared from her story. He was simply waiting for the right moment to return, and when he did, her entire life would change in ways she could never have imagined. A week had passed since Sarah found the envelope, and she still hadn't seen Michael. Every day she looked toward the diner door, half hoping he would walk in, but he never did. She had already used part of the money to pay a portion of her mother's hospital bill and buy some medicine. It had helped more than she could ever explain. But what stayed with her, even more than the money, were his words. Keep believing. The world notices kindness. She repeated that line to herself whenever she felt tired or scared. Then one bright Thursday morning, just as she was refilling the sugar jars, she heard the bell over the door ring. She looked up, and her heart skipped. Michael was back, but something was different this time. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood two men in suits, and outside the window she noticed a sleek black SUV parked near the curb. The quiet, humble man who used to sit alone in the corner booth suddenly looked important. The whole diner seemed to freeze for a moment. Even Jenna, who was usually joking around, stopped mid-sentence. Michael smiled when he saw Sarah. "Good morning," he said softly. Just like always, Sarah tried to hide her surprise. "You're back," she said, walking toward him. "We thought you'd moved on to another town." "Not yet," he said. "Actually, I came to see you." Her eyes widened. "Me, yes," he said simply. "Can we talk for a moment?" Sarah's hands fidgeted nervously. "Of course. Do you want your usual booth?" He smiled faintly. "That would be perfect." The two men in suits waited quietly near the door while Michael sat in his usual spot. Sarah brought him coffee, her heart pounding. She noticed how even his movement seemed a little different now, calm as always, but with a quiet confidence that made people pay attention. "I never got to thank you," she began, her voice trembling a little. "For the envelope. That money helped me more than you know." "I'm glad," he said. "You didn't have to thank me, Sarah. I didn't do it for that." "I know," she said softly. "But I still wanted to. You didn't even leave your name," he chuckled gently. "I thought it would be better that way. But I think it's time you knew who I really am." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" Michael took a deep breath, then glanced briefly at the men near the door, as if deciding something. Finally, he looked back at her and said, "My full name is Michael Lawson." The name sounded familiar, but Sarah couldn't place it right away. She frowned slightly. "Michael Lawson," she repeated. "Wait, I've heard that name before." He nodded slowly. "You probably have. One own a few companies, mostly in technology, healthcare, and construction. Lawson Industries, Lawson Tech, and the Lawson Foundation." Sarah blinked, her mind racing. Lawson Foundation. She had seen that name on news stories and hospital signs. They funded medical programs and scholarships all over the country. She suddenly remembered seeing an interview once with a billionaire named Michael Lawson, who talked about building hospitals for low-income families. Her mouth fell open slightly. "You're that Michael Lawson?" she whispered. He nodded again, smiling kindly. "I'm afraid so." "You're a billionaire." "I suppose that's what the magazines call me," he said with a light laugh. "But here I'm just Michael, the man who really liked your diner's eggs." She didn't know what to say. All this time, she had been serving breakfast to a billionaire without realizing it. The simple man who listened to her stories, who offered to call a tow truck, who slipped an envelope under her notepad. He was one of the richest men in the country. "I don't understand," she finally said. "Why would someone like you come here? Why pretend to be just a regular customer?" "I wasn't pretending," he said gently. "I was taking a break. Sometimes I get tired of the meetings, the noise, the people who only see money when they look at me. I came to your town because I wanted to be somewhere simple, somewhere real." Sarah listened quietly, still struggling to process it all. He continued, "From the first day I came in, I noticed you. Not because of how you look or how well you served my food, but because of how you treated people. You were kind to everyone, even the rude customers. You worked hard and never complained. You reminded me of something I had forgotten, what it means to stay good, even when life is hard." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "You don't know how much that means to me." "I think I do," he said softly. "When you told me about your mother, I wanted to help. I could see how much you loved her, how hard you were trying. So I left that envelope not to test you, but because I believed you'd use it wisely." She nodded slowly. "I did. It helped pay for her bills." "I don't know how to thank you," Michael smiled. "You already have, Sarah, just by being yourself." He paused, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out another envelope, thicker than the last. "But I came back today for another reason," he said. "I've spoken to the director at the hospital. Your mother's surgery is going to be fully paid for in advance." Sarah gasped, her eyes filling with tears. "What? You can't, Michael. That's too much." "It's not too much," he said gently. "You've done enough on your own. Let someone else carry the weight for once." She was speechless. Her voice shook as she said, "You don't even know me that well." He smiled warmly. "I know enough. I know that you're kind, honest, and brave. And I believe people like you deserve a chance to live without fear for a while." She covered her mouth, trying not to cry in front of everyone. The diner had grown quiet. Some of the regular customers were pretending not to stare, but everyone could sense something big was happening. "And that's not all," he said, his voice calm but serious. "I also spoke with my foundation director. We want to sponsor your nursing education. You said once that you wanted to be a nurse. I'd like to help you make that happen." Sarah's tears finally fell. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything that matters," he said softly. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Her whole world felt like it had flipped upside down. The woman who could barely afford rent was now being told that her mother's surgery would be paid for, that her dream of becoming a nurse could finally come true. "Michael, I don't know how to thank you," she said through tears. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "When your life gets better, and it will help someone else who's struggling, just like you were, that's how kindness keeps going." Sarah nodded, her heart full. "I promise." Michael stood up, and for the first time, everyone in the diner began to clap softly. Even Jenna had tears in her eyes. Sarah stood frozen, watching him walk out the door, his two assistants following behind. Before he got into the SUV, he turned back and gave her one last smile, the same gentle smile he'd worn the very first day he walked into the diner, that night. Sarah sat with her mother and told her everything. They both cried, overwhelmed by the miracle that had found its way into their lives. For the first time in a long time, hope didn't feel far away. It was right there, shining like the morning sun through the diner's windows, the same light that had started it all. Months passed, and Sarah's life had completely changed. Though she still remembered those early mornings at the diner, as if they had happened yesterday. Her mother's surgery had been a success, and she was finally healthy again. The worry lines that had been etched on Sarah's face for years had softened, placed by a quiet happiness she hadn't felt in a long time. Most importantly, she had finally enrolled in nursing school. Her tuition fully covered by the foundation Michael Lawson had set up for her. Every day, she reminded herself that she was living a dream she had once thought impossible. Even though her life had changed, she never forgot Michael. He didn't come to visit often, but they stayed in touch through letters and occasional calls. He never treated her like someone who owed him anything. Instead, he asked about her studies, her mother, and how she was finding joy in life again. Sarah learned that he continued to travel for his businesses and charities. But every time he wrote, it felt as though he was right there in the diner with her. Sharing her ordinary little victories, Sarah often thought back to the day he revealed who he really was. The shock, the disbelief, the flood of emotions, it all felt like a dream. But the lessons he had taught her went beyond money or opportunities. He had shown her that kindness could ripple out in ways she had never imagined. The simple things she did every day, a smile, a word of encouragement, or just listening to someone, had power. She carried that lesson into nursing school, into her work, and even into her everyday life. Her first semester at nursing school was tough. She had never imagined how challenging classes could be, balancing studies with part-time work and responsibilities at home. But every time she felt overwhelmed, she thought of Michael's words, "Keep believing." The world notices kindness. They weren't just words anymore. They had become a guide, a reminder that persistence, compassion, and honesty mattered more than stress or fear. She reminded herself that if she could handle life at the diner while caring for her mother, she could handle anything. Sarah also began noticing the effect her story had on others. Her classmates admired her resilience, often asking how she managed everything while staying so positive. She didn't mention Michael right away because she didn't want the focus to be on him. But she did share the story of receiving unexpected help from someone who saw her struggles and chose to make a difference. Students and friends were inspired, and many said it gave them hope that life could still be kind, even when it felt unfair. Back at the diner, life continued as well. Sarah would sometimes drop in on her days off, greeting the regulars who had known her for years. The corner booth where Michael used to sit had been cleaned and polished. And sometimes Sarah would glance at it and remember the quiet, kind man who had changed her life. The diner had become a symbol of hope in the town. Locals told stories about how a simple act of kindness had grown into something much larger than anyone could imagine. Tourists and travelers started stopping by, curious to see the place where a billionaire had once disguised himself to simply enjoy a meal and connect with people. Sarah also began to pay Michael's lesson forward. Whenever she had the chance, she helped someone struggling without expecting recognition. She tutored classmates who were behind in their studies, brought groceries to neighbors in need, and always listened when someone needed to talk. She discovered that giving, even in small ways, gave her a joy that was different from anything else. She realized that Michael had taught her more than just how to receive help. He had taught her how to be brave, generous, and hopeful. As her studies progressed, Sarah received more good news. She earned scholarships from other programs thanks to her hard work and dedication. Professors noticed her discipline and compassion, often using her as an example of what a true nurse in training should be. Sarah sometimes thought back to the day Michael first walked into the diner, and she smiled quietly. It amazed her that someone she had never expected could leave such a lasting impact on her life. One afternoon, while she was studying in the library, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Michael. "I'm proud of you," it read. "Keep going. Every step forward counts." Sarah smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She texted back quickly, thanking him, and added, "I won't forget what you taught me." What a writer reagrad. She went to the diner for a coffee break and noticed a young woman struggling to carry a large bag of groceries up the steps. Without thinking, she ran over and helped her inside. The woman looked tired and frustrated, but Sarah smiled warmly and said, "Here, let me help." She handed the woman her bag. Sarah felt a spark of the same feeling she had experienced when Michael had helped her. A simple act of kindness had the power to change someone's day, to maybe even their life. It wasn't just about money or fame anymore. Sarah realized that real wealth was in compassion, in noticing people, and in making a difference when no one was watching. Michael's lessons had become a part of her. She often thought about him, not with awe of his wealth, but with gratitude for his heart and the example he had set. Time passed, and Sarah's mother recovered fully. They shared quiet afternoons together, talking about life, laughing, and sometimes simply sitting in silence, grateful for the small joys. Sarah continued her studies, balancing her part-time work at the hospital with her classes. Her life, once filled with constant worry and stress, was now filled with purpose, hope, and love. Eventually, the story of Michael and Sarah became known throughout the town. Locals would tell visitors about the quiet billionaire who had walked into a diner, noticing a young waitress working tirelessly and quietly changing her life. Sarah always told the story with humility, emphasizing that it wasn't the money that mattered, but the recognition of human goodness. People listened, inspired, and reminded themselves to be kind to others in return. One day, Michael visited the town again, not to make a grand announcement, but simply to check on Sarah and her mother. She greeted him with a bright smile, and they talked like old friends, sharing stories of their lives and the small joys they had discovered along the way. For Sarah, it was a full-circle moment. The man who had entered her life quietly, almost unnoticed, was still there, quietly supporting her and reminding her to stay true to herself. Sarah knew that life would continue to have its challenges, but she felt ready for them. She had seen how one act of kindness could change everything, and she carried that lesson everywhere she went. Her dream of becoming a nurse was finally coming true, and she could see herself helping people, making their lives better, just as hers had been made better. Looking back, she realized that her encounter with Michael had not just changed her life materially, but had transformed her entirely. She had learned to hope, to believe in the goodness of others, and to be brave in the face of challenges. Her story was no longer just about struggles and bills. It was about resilience, gratitude, the power of human kindness. Sarah often returned to the diner, sometimes for a coffee, sometimes just to watch the sun rise through the dusty windows. She would smile at the corner booth where Michael used to sit, remembering the quiet man who had seen her when no one else did. And every time she saw someone in need, she remembered his words, "Help someone who's struggling just like you were." That's how kindness keeps going. Her life had changed forever, and she knew it wasn't just because of the money, the scholarships, or the opportunities. It was because someone had noticed her, had believed in her, and had shown her that a single act of kindness could ripple through her life and beyond. And she promised herself that she would continue the ripple, spreading hope and goodness wherever she could. In the end, Sarah realized that the true gift Michael had given her wasn't just financial support. It was the belief that even ordinary people, working quietly and sincerely, could be seen, valued, and celebrated. And with that belief, she faced the future with courage, joy, and a heart full of hope.